What's up? How's everybody doing? What's up, FOMO? We got ratings.com in the house. How are you guys doing?
I'm so excited.
Good. Cedric, we got Cedric here. Ryan. Ryan, you do a lot of the testing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a testing lead, so my team is
You're
in
the
charge
boss.
of the TVs.
Let's see.
We got Cedric. Cedric is the owner of ratings.com. Am I correct?
Yep. I started the company a little bit more than 10 years ago now.
10 years ago. Now, I know you guys were a website 10 years ago. When did you guys get on YouTube? Or did you get on YouTube from the beginning? A little bit about your ratings and then the YouTube ratings.
It's very interesting too, because when I started it in end of 2011, I didn't actually start testing TVs because my goal was I wanted to solve the problem of figuring out which product to buy. So I said, okay, let's simplify. Let's start with TVs, which is a hard one to buy, to decide which one to buy. And if I can solve it for TVs, I can solve it for the rest. But my hypothesis back then was I would act more as like aggregation way, so like more like a Metacritic or Rotten Tomato, that kind of stuff. And then I tried that for like a year or two, and that didn't work. It's because it didn't work because the information was not out there.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, you can aggregate, but aggregate what? So that's when I started testing TVs. Well, at first I was like buying and returning them to the store. And then after a year after that, that's when I published videos on YouTube. Still in my apartment, I was doing them with the white background that I did. So it's around like 2014-ish, the first YouTube videos, I believe. I think I posted some for that, but like actually me as a host around that time.
That's awesome. And before I get too far, I wanted to say, everyone, welcome. How's everybody doing out in the crowd? I saw Don B already said that he was watching your stuff back when plasma was king. That's pretty funny, back in the day, when I was doing those TV reviews or TV installations, man, those TVs were so heavy, dude. A 50-inch plasma weighing 120 pounds. You know how bad my life was then? It was terrible. It's terrible. And heavy TVs.
You just did a 98-inch TV that's 100 and some pounds, right? So they're so much bigger for the same weight now.
Can you believe that? A 98-inch QN98, $15,000 TV, and it only weighed like 130 pounds. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And to let the people know, because we have ratings on for a limited amount of time, but we will have an ongoing discussion with the team, whether it's Cedric or Ryan, whoever at ratings. So if we don't get all your questions in or the more technical questions, we're going to have follow-ups for sure, because I know we have a lot of people so excited with their questions. If we don't get to your questions early, it's okay. Hold on to them. We'll make sure we'll get it to ratings, and we're going to schedule something else in the future. So guys, this is an ongoing process. Nothing happens overnight. And specifically today, it's starting that open discussion about TV reviews in general, how things have changed in the last just 3 years, and what ratings is doing to reflect these changes in possibly their testing or their burn-in testing, because OLED has changed so much since 2017, 2018, when you guys started, and burn-in was a thing. And then recently it became less of a thing, or is it? Because qd-oled is completely untested. So we're definitely going to ask you guys what your approach is this time around, how it's different. And then we're going to hit things like TV sizes, right? In the past, a 55, a 65, 75, same TV. Now you have, one size is IPS, one's a VA, one's got this many hertz motion. What do we do there? And then let's not even talk about the firmware nightmare for now. We'll leave that until the end. So, Brandon, I know you want to start off with a few of the softer, low ball.
Yeah, softball questions? No, I'm kidding. No, well, first of all, I wanted to say I'm a big fan. Before I even started doing YouTube, I use you guys' website in order to compare TVs for my clients, because I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, how do I know which TV out of these two is better? Like, even as a reviewer now, I still have a hard time sometimes when it's especially a mid-tier TV or like you said, OLED versus QLED. I mean, sometimes we differentiate that by room conditions and other things like that, which would be interesting to talk about, how we could make testing, it's kind of hard, a lot of things we can talk about for testing, but really it's a great resource, and I appreciate you guys. And I'm in your early access group now, so I get all the details early on. I pay the very small fee. I think it's like $50. I love it. So I recommend people do that. So they should do that for sure. But yeah. So what are you guys feeling about so far? How do you feel about 2022? Are you excited about any new technology? What do you think?
I mean, it's pretty exciting.
Oh yeah, this year there's more changes than since a few years ago, right? With the qd-oled, it is a completely different way of doing it. It's a big change compared to before, so it is exciting to see all these differences. In a way, also it does highlight more flaws in our testing because it's different. But it is exciting just to see that.
What were you gonna say, Ryan?
I agree. The qd-oled is by far and away the most interesting thing that's happening this year. I mean, the other competitors too, even like LG with the W-OLED, but adding the heatsink. I mean, we saw Sony last year with it, but how different people are implementing it. So we're going to see a lot of different, or we see a lot of differences with the OLEDs. We had the Evo panel, the EX panel, EX with a heatsink, Evo with a heatsink. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening there. And then you get the qd-oled. So it's really interesting. The U90G came out at the end of last year as well, which was also pretty interesting. So yeah, no, it's good time.
So while we're on the topic of OLEDs, now that we're talking OLEDs, let's break into a recent announcement you guys had, which is, hey, we're going to start a whole new round of OLED burn-in tests to reflect the new pixel refresh, whatever it is they have, of the traditional W-OLEDs. And then we need to test this new qd-oled. Does it make it more risk tolerant to burn-in, or is it more risky of burn-in? Can you tell us what your game plan is this time around about the OLED, regarding the OLED burn-in test that you're starting? When does this start? What TV models do you have? Let's hear it.
And how many channels are going to have, or how many of the TVs are going to have my videos on them 24/7? I want to know.
Logo burn-in, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting because we actually considered quite heavily last year to do one. We look at plans. We had a few different ideas on how to run it, different kind of content. We show different kind of setup. But ultimately, last year, we decided to do nothing. We decided to do nothing last year because we're not happy with the answers it would provide with the constraint that we set. There might have been a better solution that we could have come up with, but we're not happy there. But this year, we asked the question because now I think there's even more interesting questions that can be answered than last year, especially with the qd-oled one, but even like with the heatsink, that's also more interesting questions. And what's hard also with all of this is what kind of content you show, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of variables, right? There's a lot of questions that people have, and it's impossible practically to answer all of them. So we need to choose which questions to answer. And so one of the questions that we choose not to answer, and even though a lot of people have, is what kind of content impact burn-in? We cannot try to answer it with the C7 a few years ago because we had different kind of content, even video game was there, that kind of stuff. I don't think we got a perfect answer to that question. But I think now with over the years, when we see also the feedback of other YouTubers, what the investigation that they did, plus the different users that emailed us with some content, with some subtitles issues, that kind of stuff. Now I think there is a pretty much common knowledge of what caused burn-in as far as content, and it can be simplified like as a cumulative bright over time, right? So no matter the content, as long as it's cumulative at that area, which is bright and saturated, it increases the risk. And then how much do you have that? Even if you cycle through, that increases the risk. Exact timing will depend on your kind of content, exact games you watch, so it's kind of hard to predict. So for this burn-in test, we're not going to try to answer more that question. It's not to say that it's still no questions left. I think there are questions left there, but it's hard to answer them. To answer them really good, you need to have a lot of different content, a lot of different video games also, and it's really hard. So we're not going to tackle that issue. Instead, one of the first questions we're going to want to ask is, compared to the C7 that we tested, manufacturers have been telling often that every year it improves, right? So now it should be improved a lot compared to the system. And so that's the first question we're going to want to ask is, did it actually improve? And also with the qd-oled, how is that behaving compared to before? So that's the definite questions we want to ask. And the secondary question also that we want to answer is, all that improvement, if there is one, did it went into the brightness instead? So are the manufacturers just pushing the panels more just to get more brightness, and the end result is same burn-in just because they are pushing it more? Like the way that they gain, they just go to brightness. So that's a question also that we hope to be able to answer. So that's the main two questions we want to answer. There's also a third one, but the third question we're sticking with private for now because we need more details to figure out the stuff.
Fair enough.
So
What
I was going to throw a real quick question. So you're going to have your own patterns with different brightnesses in the same test. That way, you know, and I'm just going to make this up because based on what you said, so you have this screen, you have like 100 nits, 1,000 nits, whatever it is, right? And each one represents, and then over time, when you look at it, oh, hey, you know what? 500 nits still burns in. Is that what you're thinking? Or how are you doing it differently this time to see the burn-in risk of different brightnesses and how the TV addresses that?
It's a good question. We haven't finalized 100% yet the details. So we don't exactly finally, I mean, we have a few ideas, but it's not finalized yet. But it brings the whole question of there's ways we can set up the test that will give us a lot of technical data about the panel. As you mentioned, okay, different kind of stuff, right? Or different frequency of the color, or there's a lot of patterns we can do. But the more we go that route, the less is going to correspond to the user's real content, and also the less the TV is going to be able to compensate for real content in different ways, right? Either by shifting select pixel and that kind of stuff, right? So we want to be careful with that approach. It's a useful one to get more data out of the same TV, so lower cost of testing, which is cool. But it comes at a risk. Risk of it's no longer relatable to real life. So we want to find the right balance for that. And we're still finalizing the details, so we don't know the fully answer yet to that question. But it's something that we need to be careful of the risk of going too much further into technical, that it becomes no longer that much relevant for real life.
And one of the questions I had, which was someone had asked it before, like what will you be doing as far as like how long will you be running each one? Because obviously there's like pixel refresh and things that happen when their TVs are turned off. Have you changed the amount of time per day you'll be running them? Because obviously you're not just going to be running them 24/7, right?
No, yeah, we did like originally we did like one test with only 3 TVs, right? Initially, and that one was running a lot more. But then after that, like we switched out that it actually turns off for a few hours so that it had time to the cycle every day, that kind of stuff. For this test, we do want an experience that's more close to real life, because we want to make sure that it's more relatable, even at the cost of we're going to delay the results by a few months. I think the trade-off is worth it. In that case, so we're going to try to get result as soon as possible, but realistically, we're not going to get result in a few months, right? So I'm fine with delaying a little bit the result if it matches a little bit better real life. Sure. That means turning off the TV, but still leaving them plugged, but like turning them off properly, having that they have time to do their stuff if they want to, that kind of stuff. So.
I may have missed it. How long is the duration of the testing, like from beginning to end? What is your game plan for, or how many hours do you want? Are you planning to have the TVs running before you say, okay, this is the halfway result?
It's a good question. It's something that we officially haven't finalized the details on, but basically it's until the end. Whatever the end is, that's the question. But we're looking for a long-term test more than a year time frame. But it's not to say that we're not going to have data before that. But we're not talking about just do a test of 6 months and then forget about it. We're thinking about something more long-term than that.
Okay.
You know what's funny to me is 2 things. one, like I think that's exciting. The whole time I'll be watching, I'll be like, okay, where are we at? You know, so any updates is great. And then secondly, it still trips me out that people are willing to buy like a lesser TV that has, you know, bad uniformity because it's not an OLED, instead of just buying an OLED and enjoying it for 5 or 10 years and just saying like, you know, I love OLED TV. It looks so amazing. Yes, it might burn in 5 or 10 years down the road, but whenever you guys put those out, it says we think most likely people aren't going to experience burn-in because of mixed content. I'm just like, gosh, people just don't understand it. And you get so many people saying that I don't want an OLED. I don't know how long they think that these LED TVs are going to last them anyways, but just one of those things that I think is funny.
Yeah, and then your point around is very interesting because it ties into the third question that I didn't mention that we actually want to answer. Yeah, it is interesting because even like a current understanding of burn-in is, it could happen, yeah. But a lot of people, it's not gonna happen for them in their circumstances, in their normal TV usage lifespan, that they're actually gonna keep the TV, right? It is something to keep in mind for some people, sure, depending on their stuff. But so that's definitely an interesting question. It ties into the things I also want to dive more deeper of more the general question of the trade-off of OLED versus other technologies and longevity tied to that. Yeah, and for this, like it's gonna be a more long-term test. But as I mentioned, we do want to keep as transparent as possible, as alter results as we go in. So we're gonna try to make it as real-time results as possible, intermeasure possible.
Okay.
You know, Bad Tech has a good question, and we were probably going to talk about it at some point anyway, so we might as well just now. But well, first of all, is the burn-in risk is part of your scoring, I believe, isn't it? Isn't there some instances where you put that in or not? Right.
Yeah, not in the best way, I believe, right now, but it is part of it. Yeah.
And then one of the questions that we've talked about a lot on this stream, and maybe it's part of the reason why you guys, well, I think Shay had heard our live stream where we were talking about the real scene tests and kind of like how it kind of maybe just confuses us at the very minimal. Like I just sometimes, I'm not the most technical person, so I'm just like, oh, this score. So real scene seems to vary a lot of the times, you know, with an LCD that can be, you know, real scene brightness that's just crazy because these larger windows are easier for them to get, you know, in a real scene with, you know, with the big panel lights that you have. But the question is, you know, how could you change the real scene test to be better representation of like real content? Do you guys have an opinion on that or working on something like that?
A real scene number now is broken. It used to be pretty good a few years ago, but now with a mix of the new technologies, the more HDR widespread, even local dimming team. With the mini-LED, backlight, that kind of stuff, it kind of drifts away as far as accuracy of representation to real life. And that's an issue. And it's an issue that we're actually even now working on. And we hope to publish a test bench update in about like 2 weeks on that to improve it. Because right now, it is misleading, the number. It doesn't really tell the whole story. It doesn't tell the whole story of even real scene that in real life you're going to get. And maybe you're going to get that number, but good luck. That's something we actually want to fix. And I think it's one of the biggest current issue with terminology. And that's the one that kind of drifts a little bit away. Because a few years ago, I think it was representative. Not perfect, but kind of representative. But now it kind of drifts slowly away.
And now, since we're just talking about the ratings testing program, and well, actually, you know, I always have to ask this: rtings, it's ratings, right?
It's
not
ratings.
rtings. I just want to make sure I got it right.
I think Alex helped us last year.
Yeah.
When we were talking with Alex last year, everyone was like rtings, and I'm like, dude,
Rtings.
it's got to be ratings. But
I see rtings, I want to say it, but then I see you guys. No, it's ratings. Okay, so moving on. On the way.
Well, on that note, if I mean, just stop you there, because originally when I registered the website, I tried to register ratings with a, but it was already taken. I didn't want to pay money yet to get it. So I said, oh, let's do a shortcut and just move on. But in like even the first YouTube videos that I made a few years after the registration, I did call it rtings. And then after a while, I say, oh, probably I should call it just what my initial intent was. And then I switched to ratings. So officially now it's ratings, but I mean, I don't mind if people call it rtings because in a way it kind of is. And I did it too. So
Cedric, don't confuse FOMO. He's going to start calling it rtings again. Let's just leave it at ratings. Let's just leave. Anyways, what are you going to say?
Only because I want you guys to be unique, and more importantly, people will know, because if I say ratings, they will literally type in ratings.com and they'll get some, I don't even know who owns ratings.com, right? But back to your testing. So this is something that I noticed when I was getting my S95B calibrated. So Sammy Prescott calibrated, he said to me, this is interesting. In movie mode, you get the most accurate SDR, but then in HDR, filmmaker mode is the most accurate. So don't forget to, I'm like, what? And then it hit me, right? Because as I read your reviews, you told me exactly which mode you're in to get the most accurate. And then you have companies with filmmaker, LG, Samsung, and then you have Sony, who refuses to have anything to do with filmmaker. They have their own. How do you choose the mode? Like when you choose a mode, what mode is it you choose for each TV brand? Like, what are you thinking? And then how does that affect what things when we have updates that literally change the mode's accuracy? So the S95B recently had an update where I have to recalibrate my S95B again because they've readjusted the UOTF curves. So can you explain to us your process in choosing the mode and what you do with those modes if these things show differently in each TV?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point. It's a good question. We choose the mode that we expect to be the most accurate for that model across all of the products, all the variants and individual units that people would get. There was also a philosophy change that we did a little while back that might not be correct anymore, might be outdated, but the current thinking is what we think will be accurate for the most people. And we want to leave it in the default settings. So we used to play with contrast when we calibrated, and we used to play with a bunch of settings, but now we take whatever's there. So if it's a Samsung and there's 5 options between dynamic, standard, movie, filmmaker, and I think they got, anyway. We choose the one that we expect to be accurate for all units of that product for the most people. In some cases, filmmaker mode, when we measure it, is more accurate. In some cases, movie mode is more accurate. We generally choose movie still. Again, could be an antiquated way of doing it, but because it still leaves people options to fiddle with it a little bit more. Filmmaker mode takes you a little bit, gives you a little bit less settings to play with, but. Yeah, in general, for both SDR and HDR, we just want to leave whatever default settings in there without touching anything of the sliders, what we expect to be the best for all users. And then, of course, we calibrate further from there, and we expect people to potentially tinker from there. And we do suggest, like, if you like the advanced contrast enhancer, use it. If you like a different local dimming setting, use it. But in general, it's just what we expect to work for that model for the most amount of people on average.
And what and like I love that you have those, like, you know, use this to get a little more brightness or use that. Like, that's always good. What about, like, you know, I think FOMO is probably leading into this too. Like, they're not all the accurate modes are not created equal though, right? So then is one TV in its most accurate mode gaining an advantage in those reviews then, because a certain TV might just be brighter? Like you said, custom mode for Sony may not be the same as film. So do you guys feel like it's hard to, like, make those comparisons equal because sometimes the modes are different for each TV then?
For sure. We don't have the sample size of multiple units of the same model to really know what's best. So in the past, what we've done is multiple different models from the same manufacturer from the same year. So let's say Sony, we have a bunch of Sonys from that year, and we noticed that overall custom mode was the most balanced, even if one particular unit wasn't, that the average was. We'll generally think, okay, this must mean that this is the what Sony expects to be the most accurate out of the box mode. So we make our decision based off that, but we don't have the sample size that, let's say, Sony or Samsung do, what they expect coming out of the factory.
And this goes to what we're talking about right now, because you or your team calibrate the TVs, but to what degree do you calibrate it, right? Because some people like, oh, I need to get it perfect calibration. Others like, well, just good enough. Can you touch on your calibration process if you're changing it at all? If you're using the same, is HDR change anything? Because SDR calibration, HDR calibration. What are your thoughts on your calibration process?
Did you want to answer that one, Cedric? Okay.
Well, I'm gonna half answer it. You can answer,
Okay.
I guess the harder half, because there's kind of two things there too, right? Is that at the model level, what's the best picture mode and that kind of stuff, right? So and that we do vary it per model. But the kind of what Ryan was also mentioning is on the unit basis, because we had an issue originally when we when I was doing myself, even in my apartment calibrating. Okay, I said let's calibrate it, get the best results, perfect charts, perfect everything, and I mean it was working. You can get it there. Of course, there's such as over calibrating that introduce other kind of issues like posterization and that kind of stuff, but without going too much to that. But then there was a few sometimes things that was really strange. There was, for example, I don't remember the exact model, but it was a Samsung model. Back then, there was the core temperature, 1.2 was considered usually the best one. But there was one model that we got, a cheap budget Samsung. Our unit had 1.1 as the most accurate by default. And technically, if you want to get best accuracy, it was a lot easier to start from 1.1 and then do it from there. So we did that for a while. And even with contrast, kind of what Ryan mentioned is, in some cases, you need to increase it. Or even color, sometimes you need to increase it, right? If you want to get the optimal. But what we saw there is it starts to be risky that it might be optimal for our unit, but it might be detrimental if people copy their settings. And even if you have a disclaimer in your settings, don't copy them. People still copy them, even if you have the disclaimer. But we need to be careful there. So we try, in general, for settings, besides the white balance, that this one has a clear disclaimer, we try to recommend settings that people can safely copy and get a ballpark results, but not necessarily calibrate or specific unit to the max. So we go just slightly beyond that to the safe side that if we were to copy, besides the white balance, it would be safe. So that's where we get, but we don't get more than that, increasing contrast as risk if, risk on the same unit, but especially if you don't know the unit, it's hard to recommend increasing that kind of stuff, right? So we don't go there. So in some cases, we could get better results, but we hold ourselves back on purpose to be careful of not recommending settings that could be worse for people.
Yeah. Do you want to say something, Ryan?
Well, I was going to talk more to our actual calibration process.
Yes, please.
So our first thing is that in the pre-cal, I just wanted to mention that we do look at and play with all of the settings, basically. On every TV, we don't just set it to the one we think it's going to be. We play with all of them and check to make sure, of course, because these things can change year over year. And it's how we gather our data of looking at all of the different models from the same manufacturer every year to make sure that that hasn't shifted. And then we calibrate, as Cedric was saying. In SDR, the calibration is also a test. So we don't try to go super in depth in the service menu and stuff. We try to stay in the regular accessible menu. We have our CR250 spectroradiometer metered to our CR100 colorimeter, and we use that with Kalman, and we calibrate adjusting the white point and the colors. We also set a hard timer for 1 hour because as part of the test, if a TV is really tricky, if the 60% control affects the 5% or 50%, and then the 50% affects the 40%, and then it's just a pain to calibrate, we want it to sort of reflect in the score. So we set that hard timer at 1 hour, and we end calibrating when we get to that hour, or if we have gotten to a good result that we can't get past, then we stop. And then that will be the post-calibration result that we use. Currently in HDR, we don't calibrate. So that's possibly an antiquated part of the process that we might need to fix. I know that, like you mentioned, HDR has changed in the past 3 years for sure, and things have evolved a lot. So that's something that we need to look at. But currently, we don't calibrate it. We leave it in its most calibrated HDR mode. Again, similar process that we look at all the modes and see which one is the most accurate, what we expect to be the most accurate. and then we take our measurements from there. That could be just a side note, reasons for why we, as different reviewers, get numbers that are slightly different. For example, the G2 being a little bit brighter than when it gets calibrated. But yeah.
This is really insightful. I didn't realize that HDR was not calibrated, but that makes sense as well. So for your HDR when we see pre and post calibration, that is specifically for SDR. In
Correct.
HDR, you're just taking the most accurate picture mode as you get it from the TV, whatever it is that you specify, filmmaker, whatever it is, right? And then from there, is there a place where you tell us, okay, this is out of the box white point, or it is what it is? I mean, it doesn't matter. Pre-calibration or post, it should be the same for HDR or SDR. Is that the assumption?
It's a really good point. I can add I think Cedric wants to say something, but I'll just quickly say, not really. Which is again probably needs to be fixed. You can see the result though in the color gamut box. You're able to see the tracking and the tone mapping of P3 and Rec 2020, and it will show the white point there. But as a number, as a result, it's not present. We do have the data for it, but it's just presented in that graph instead.
Yep. But you're right, for more like especially like when we design that like methodology, it is an assumption because back then when HDR was first introduced, you couldn't calibrate HDR. So that's why we made the assumption of that, and we didn't change it since then, although we should, but we didn't change it since then. So it was the assumption, but it's definitely something that we need to revisit.
And I think, well, this is a great segue to just talking about HDR testing in general, right? So let's talk HDR testing, because this is something that I've learned as I'm doing reviews. Wow, there's just so many layers of, well, first, there's tone mapping, there's just TVs where you have a peak brightness, but if you have an APL of, let's say, even 10 nits, it changes the peak brightness. Do you have, or what are your plans for revising HDR testing to reflect what a consumer will see when they get an HDR TV, right? Whether it's the top of the line, A90J, G2, or just barely passable HDR TV. What are your thoughts on revising HDR testing in general? What do you think is important? Because on the one hand, we can dive so deep into these numbers, but on the other, most consumers on ratings, I just want one with just good HDR impact. But what does that mean in a measurement today?
It's a very good question. It's also kind of also what you touched a little bit in your video about that you just posted for like the HDR accuracy, right? It's kind of related to that question. And there is a whole concept of accuracy as the measuring intent, especially that HDR, the format has a lot more intent than the SDR. So there's the whole question there, and then there's the whole question of whatever the TVs are doing, which also is sometimes crazy stuff on it, just because they are not able to do it directly, so they need to tweak or adjust or tone map or depending on their abilities, right? So it's a hard question. It's a question also that I think, even if we take just, let's say, a subset of even just brightness, I don't think one single number would be able to represent what a person is actually going to perceive at in real life for more than one scene, right? I mean, honestly, it was always the same scene, maybe, but if you watch even just a whole movie, that movie is gonna be completely different, even just for brightness, and that's just brightness. That's not even UTF or all that kind of other problems that there is. And in a way, that's also a little bit of flaw that right now our methodology has, is by having just like one real scene number, it's not that much representative. So we don't want to tackle that problem, but kind of what to allude to, it's in a way it's an impossible problem to be perfect on it, because there's so many scenes, so many stuff going on, and it's not just about brightness, it's about color volume and a lot of things that impacts. So it's not gonna be perfect, but we do want to that, and our strategy that we're working on right now for brightness specifically is to have photos of different scenes and different measurements on those scenes listed. So that it's also going to be more transparent of what actually we're measuring at, and having more real scene than our made up scene that we did. I mean, it was good back then. It was, but no, it's a bit too made up.
You know what? Yeah, as much as I like watching your reviews, your guys' office is getting kind of boring looking. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. No, but
and it's the old office. It's not even the
it's not even the. Oh, come on! It's not even the new office. No. It would be really cool to have like a darker scene with some specular highlights and a brighter scene, and then be able to average those numbers out in a way to get like your overall HDR performance with tone mapping and other things.
And color, right? You're right, because
color, exactly.
Orange at 500 nits is completely different than orange at 800, and you can't even have orange at 1200 nits, right? It just, most TVs can't even do that. And this kind of goes to what Brett's asking, and I know a lot of people are asking, so they see a number, and can you answer the question, is 8.2 in 2020, is this still 8.2 today, or do you go back and revise it, in 2023? That TV is now a 7.2. What do you do with the changing performances over time?
It's a very good question. So, and that's an issue that even a while ago we identified a more general issue, and we try to be as transparent as possible. So that's why we introduced the test bench system. So on top of the review, you see like, tested on 1.6. All scores that are listed with the same version are directly comparable. When we do an update, like when we're going to do in the next few weeks about the brightness, we're going to make the change. We're going to create the 1.7 methodology. We're going to retest TVs. For publishing, when we actually launch it, that test bench, we're going to have a certain number retested, but then we're going to continue after that to retest more. And you can see then the updates changing for the old TVs. But we don't have the 200 TVs anymore in the office. We have a lot. We have 70, 80-ish TVs, so it's a lot, but we're not probably going to retest 100% of them. But the website, though, make sure, if you want to compare the score, even like in the side-by-side tool that we have, the page you can compare, check at the top, the methodology. If it's written the same number, it is comparable. So that's the way to use it. But if it's a different number, if it's like 1.1 of like TVs 6 years ago, it doesn't mean the same thing. But we try to as much convert, but it's a lot of testing to convert. So we do limit ourselves. But if you look at that, at least you can have an idea of what is comparable and what is beyond comparable.
So this kind of opens up. We were talking about this off air as well. Okay, so you have your version testing, and then I love your reviews because you actually say, well, this is for firmware 1, 2, 3. And whether you update that firmware or whatever, it doesn't matter. At least I know for sure that if I'm going to read your review, got to check the firmware. And then sometimes you say, well, in this firmware update, nothing happened, and so forth. So how do you deal with firmware updates? Do you retest after a firmware update, or only when people like me complain, oh my God, this is a terrible firmware update, and then you retest? How do you deal with firmware updates when over the life of the TV, like 6 months and you're done? No more firmware updates, a year, let us know.
For sure. Yes. When we test with a certain firmware, we put it in the review. I think you're specifically talking about something, I could tell. But yeah, we do want to retest stuff when there's a new firmware that comes out. We get a lot of feedback from the community. We get feedback from other reviewers as well. We get feedback from a lot of people, and we love getting the feedback. We catalog everything, even though we might not be the quickest to react to it. It's something that we're trying to improve on, but we do catalog everything, and we do want to get to stuff. And we do prioritize things based off of how important they are for the community. And we do our best to answer the community. So if the S95B gets a firmware update, we try to go right back in and test it. It's a little bit of a pain that that they ship with a broken firmware sometime, or firmware that isn't final, and then we have to go back because we want to get the reviews out for people as soon as possible, right? It's more useful for people to make a buying decision because they're excited about TV, so we try to get the review out for them. But we want that review to be to remain in good quality, and that they can refer to it, and everything is up to date. So we do go back and retest them on new firmwares, depending on what the firmware improved as well. So we'll touch on just the local dimming if the firmware only touch on local dimming, but if that affected the color volume, we'll also update the color volume and so on and so forth.
And it's hard to know. That's also the issue, right? Is what actually changed? Do we retest the whole thing and that takes like a week of retesting, or is it a specific test? Now, of course, we can sometimes know it, at least the likely candidates, but like we get sometimes a lot of questions also of, input lag. Did it change this firmware? And like people are wondering, and it's sometimes legit to wonder, especially if it's unusual, it's high. But we need sometimes to filter it by how likely do we think it fixed the issue, and then we prioritize appropriately on this. But it's hard. Sometimes we don't know what's going to change, and sometimes nothing changes. Even if the manufacturer is explicitly said it changes, sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
We love patch notes.
Here's a quick question too, with regards to some of that stuff, because it changes. Did you guys have a good time with the S95B? First of all, a TV that just kind of came out of nowhere for me. FOMO and I were talking about QD-OLED, and the Sony was going to be the first one out. All of a sudden, there's just a Samsung OLED out, and we're like, is this a QD-OLED? Is it OLED? But did you guys have a lot of questions about the accuracy, or is Samsung gaming the system? Did you get a lot of these kind of questions like a lot of us did?
And let me lay the groundwork for this so that we don't misrepresent the drama, because
I don't mean drama. I just
no, but it is drama.
The second part of the question is more what I was talking about. But go ahead, yeah.
It's definitely a conflict between old school focus of pure accuracy, color accuracy, but then as it gets brighter, accuracy does go out the window. However, HDR impact appears to be better preserved. But then, of course, as you get brighter and brighter, now you even lose all color. And a lot of us on the HDR side, where we really want to feel the HDR impact, we're willing to give up some color accuracy to get that extra brightness, which the S95B is delivering in color volume, while others want more color accuracy and willing to pull down with tone mapping. Where are you guys on that, if anything at all? Because this is something that, as reviewers, I think it's fun because it needs to be brought out for the consumers to understand what we're talking about. There is no right or wrong answer. I want everyone to know that's my opinion. I really love HDR impact as it pertains to that just extreme and dark and bright. And sometimes I might lose a little color. I'm okay with it. So now that we have the context.
Yeah. I mean, from our philosophy point of view in a review, we try to not judge what people should care about, meaning that we try to expose the information and then let people decide. Now, of course, we have like usages that people often look, but ideally we prefer that people create their own usage, pick what they care about and do it. So in that sense, like what is the perfect HDR TV? It's a TV that's able to switch, that's able to do both the accuracy if you want it, and if you don't want it, you can control how much boosts, and ideally control it, like how much actually you want it to boost, right? That would be like the perfect TV that would please a lot. And our job, the way we see it, is to expose all sides and then let people choose which one to prefer. And that TV lets you prefer. The other one, you cannot get accuracy, you cannot get boosts, or that kind of stuff, right? And that's worthwhile to know, because at the end of the day, the goal is people to be happy with their TV. But happy has different definition based on people. So the way I view our job is expose the information, let people decide what they would be happy with. So that's the way I see it. Personally, I'm more on the accuracy side personally, but that's just personal. Everyone has different opinion.
Now, interestingly, I was going to say, interestingly,
Go ahead.
I'm a little bit more on the boost side myself, but I test for accuracy. There's a difference. So the important thing is that we remove our own bias, even though we might like something more. It's important to, like Cedric said, expose the proper information for people to make their own decisions. But like you were saying a little bit, FOMO, sometimes losing that accuracy just for that boost is really nice. And I like big, bright colors. I won't use dynamic mode. There's no way. I'll still say in the most calibrated mode. Yeah, like calibrated bright or dark is where I'll stay. But sometimes I'll play with the color slider a little bit or something, just personally at home. But of course, when we're testing, we're just trying to expose the information.
And so before we jump to this TV size difference, I was going to say, normally I never watch standard mode on Samsung, but when we did the 98-inch And then we put on some sports. Let's play with standard. Goes, okay, when I watch sports on a Samsung, this standard mode from 15 feet away, it works really well. Like NBA finals, college football, I can see the contrast and the moving stuff a lot better because we don't care about color accuracy. So oftentimes it forces me to change my context. It's not always filmmaker or movie mode. Sometimes standard works really well for the content you watch. So definitely it's not because a lot of people are like, oh, we're always in this one slot. It's always accurate mode or always boost mode. It depends on the content. And I'm going to be watching standard for a lot of sports just because I never thought to put it on standard when I watch sports, and I love it. But so now we talk about accuracy. How accurate are reviews now? Mine included, where we pick a 65-inch or a 55, and I know on your site you say, well, we expect the larger sizes to be the same, and it has been. And then recently we get Samsung with 85 inches of VA panel, smaller ones are ADS, or Hisense U7G 75 inches of IPS panel, or we have these literally different technologies that are so different from panel to panel, not even subtle. How do you guys deal with that now?
Would you like me to answer?
I can answer. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, at least I can answer part of it potentially. But it's a good question. At the moment, since we're only testing one size of a product, we know that our review should be representative for that size. And in general, like you've said, in the past, most of the panels along the different sizes remain the same. Now, we have known for a few years that very occasionally, there's some panels like the 43-inch in a series will be only 60 hertz instead of 120 hertz or something like that. And it's something that we actually do put in our reviews. But I think you bring up a good point that it's potentially not properly exposed, or we don't draw enough attention to it so that people can actually know about it. Because at the bottom of the reviews, we have a section that says the differences between sizes and variants. And we do mention things that in there. And this is mostly community driven. So we'll get feedback from users who have their own panel or like their own 75-inch that's different than the 65. They'll send us pictures of the pixels that it's IPS instead of VA. And we'll update the review to include that information. And we try to scour the internet as well for spec sheets and things like that from the manufacturers to try to include as much detailed information as possible, even regional variants between the US and Europe and stuff like that. So we do try to do our best to make that clear and have it all detailed for people. But I don't think that it's exposed as well as it could be potentially. So and on that topic as well, since we're not testing them, we can't necessarily know what they're going to perform like. We can estimate, and if we test a VA, we can say, okay, in general, it might be the same because it might use the same backlight with the same other components, but we expect a wider viewing angles and worse contrast. And we have to be vague because we don't know what the variant would actually perform like.
And so this kind of brings up something that not a lot of people realize, which is, like you said, the community brings it to your attention. And I lurk in your community a lot. How much is your community a part of your reviews? Because a lot of us, me initially, I go to ratings, I go on your site, I use the database, the tools, and then I'm done. However, as a member, I dig deeper into the community. There's a lot of good information, user information, and you respond to it. So it's not, there's this discussion, but it's not always shared in the review because it's an ongoing discussion. Should we consider that a part of the review as well? Because I think a lot of your value comes in your responses and then the contributions from the community members, because this is something that, well, some of our members have told me at length, this is the number one reason why I joined, was to be active in your community and receive this information because, well, we have Whisper Status in the lobby. He is the one that is just so like, you don't understand, ratings is more than just a database. It's all this stuff. Can you tell me how you envision we should use ratings, including your forum?
It's a good question. And it's a question also that I don't think right now we do well. And in a way, like also like even like the job that you do provide a lot of value on top of like even what the basic that we provide, right? And that's useful information for a buyer. All of those, all the different YouTube channel, all the different people that sends direct issues, that they raise an issue, that their specific unit add a different uniformity, that's another data point of what's the variance of uniformity of that specific model, right? And that's a lot of useful information, and we need the community to expose more of that. And I think right now we're kind of trying us to do it like the discussion section, but I think there needs to be more of that. We need people to share more about the older partner they have, their especially the different sizes, but it's not just that. It's more than that. And I think we can do a better job to even us as making sure we keep the main review up to date, and even in some cases change the score if we see that we didn't experience an issue, but a lot of people experience the issue. And that's something I think that right now we're not doing well, but that we should be doing and push more.
And I think that's something that I wanted to bring on Brian. He is the one, your biggest fan, both literally and figuratively.
What's up, guys? Hey, how's it going?
He Good. Really uses you guys for everything, the tools, just everything, and especially your personal guidance to help him through this. So, Brian, can you tell us how people should use ratings the way you use it? He's like what do they call a power user, right?
Yeah, well, I'm basically here to do a testimonial because, I've met Ryan last year, so it was great to meet Ryan. Never met Cedric, who again, to geek out a little bit, 2016, 2015, I went through a terrible thing with a bunch of defective panels. But even before that, as I was looking at 1080p and getting out of 1080p, Cedric did a video on a Sony that had a shadow detail defect. It was a circle. It was one of Sony's last 1080p displays. And Cedric's up there with this t-shirt. I'm like, who is this young guy doing this? And when I researched further, he was absolutely right that last 1080p TV wasn't worth it. So what was interesting when I first started getting into 4K, those of you that know me, I had a series of defective panels, and there was no one like us in terms of YouTube influencers at the time. And actually, they responded to me on Facebook. And I'll send you the pictures, FOMO. You can pass them on. But it was this long journey of keeping me sane back then, before we existed on the platform. So the way Cedric and those guys helped me back then, and I was spending a ridiculous amount of money, and without their guidance, I wouldn't have gotten through it. And I also wouldn't have started my own channel because I actually had to send them videos of the problems I was having with displays. So, and then as a as a new creator, I actually was able to use their website and their tools to actually have content. So I would use their comparisons as actual videos of the Q9FN versus this or versus that. So you actually supplied me with content and actually saved me a ton of sanity. And the fact that you guys are still around, and I think the leaders in this industry, it's very important that the insider program to be able to use your tools, but how important you are in this industry, even though we've all risen as influencers, you guys are still the go-to. And I have no questions. I just wanted to share that.
Hey, Brian, I want to jump in.
Hold on with that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I was going to ask that question in a minute because I was talking to Rainer offline. Were you going to do that one, FOMO,
yes,
or no?
I was going to give the context after Rainer Richter explained it because it was segueing to Brian's ending. So, yes.
Okay, go ahead if you want. I was going to. Yeah.
Okay, so.
Oh, we lost him. All right, I'll take over then. First, I wanted to put up here, KG. I agree with Brian. Again, I have been using ratings, like I had said, in the same respects, comparisons, trying to help me decide what's good for my clients before I even started doing this as well. So I think a lot of us feel the same way. And the same thing is, hold on.
Oh, I'm back. Okay,
hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Right,
so, and KG has the same thing. First of all, ratings a huge inspiration to my journey. You guys brought us something we never had. So thank you for everything you do. He loves you guys too, except he has a problem with your QN90A versus QN90B rating. So that's something we can talk to if you guys wanted to real quick. But I think FOMO wanted to jump into one of our other guys talking about like sample size and things like that, which we were talking about. So which one did you want to do first, FOMO?
Oh, well, since you have the KG's question, let's hit that, because I know we have to wrap up for ratings as well.
Real quick, before you jump to KG, I got to say this. I was around doing this before any of these guys did it, meaning that I was alone contacting you guys, spending between $4,000 and $9,000, and you were helping me. So all I want to say is thank you. That's it. I don't have any questions, but you have, and even these guys leaving their comments have no concept of what it was like 5 years ago reaching out to you.
Yeah.
No concept, because we have each other to bounce ideas off of. These guys with their comments, they have us. I had no one.
Oh, well, you know
and
what?
Cedric was there. I had no one. And I was dealing with a real issue. You're talking about a huge amount of money in 2016. And you were a friendly face in your videos. Your guys responding. That's all I want to say. I have no questions, but just thank you.
Brian, so you forced the segue back to this question now.
But for me to you, I just want to say thank you so much. Not for even just what you do now, but what you did for me and my family back then. It's no bull. It really did change my life. I really appreciate it.
So if I may say that thanks for this. It means a lot that we're able to do that. And also, I think the reason also why we're able to be that to do that is also part of people like you that brought up those issues. Is in isolation, us with like one unit, there's so much we can do about getting information. We need people that have issues that bring up to us. We need to listen to them, and again, in a way, that's also why I feel a bit bad about like we kind of drift away as far as our methodology to the market. And I think that we didn't really listen to the feedback we received in the last like 2 or 3 years. That's something I want to correct because there is value for all of you, all the users that when they send us issues. It is valuable. It's valuable not only because we can help all of you, but also that we gain understanding of what's going on to units, what actually people are perceiving the stuff, and what's the difference between what we say and what's out there. And that's valuable because it helps us narrow that gap. And in a way, that's what we did a little bit not as good in the last few years, is we let that gap grow. We kind of not necessarily stop listening, but stop acting on closing that gap.
But even then, you guys, there wasn't, whether it was CNET or any of the other websites, there was no responding back to the person asking. You would read a review. You guys actually were like, "Hi, I'm here." And even things like the 940E having a slow pixel response, you were doing things that didn't exist in those reviews back then, whether it was HDR, whether it was blooming or edgelit bleed, things that the guys that are watching now don't even remember. You were letting people know. And I actually bought the 940E, even though your comment said, "Don't buy it for gaming." And those are my first videos on the platform. But no one, if you read those videos back then, you read the Z9D, you read the 940E, no one in the industry was talking about.
They have to leave in an hour, so I have to jump in and close them out.
Okay. So I had a question on that first though, FOMO. I think we'll be okay on time here.
Are you sure? I want to make sure that they don't get shut down by the landlord or whatever. They might have to bail.
One quick question on what Brian is talking about, which I think is really important, the feedback in the community. And I know you guys said that you wanted to get, start maybe acting on some of that community. Is there a way that we can maybe start a new thread on your guys' website where people can come from this chat and go, and we can kind of put some of the ideas that we've been talking about, or maybe some of the questions that weren't asked today, where they can put some of those questions and we can kind of start a discussion based off of this? Is that should we just open a thread and maybe that'll just give you guys some feedback, and maybe for the next time we talk about it? I know I do want to get to that question too, FOMO, but would that be okay if we started a little thread and that maybe will help spark a little bit more communication there?
For sure. That would be useful.
Yeah, cool. And then I know one of our, sorry, FOMO, I kept moving that because I just wanted Brian to get that stuff out. But we have a guy that do you want to talk about it, FOMO? I saw you were listening to
this is exactly the segue we're talking about, which is, as you guys have ambitions. And so what TechMed Rainer Richter, he's from Europe, and we were asking him, hey, what do you mean by it doesn't work properly? So what he intends to say is, in order to do this right, it's very expensive, right? I mean, it's incredibly ambitious because now we have different sizes, different technologies. But this goes to a larger question. how big do you want ratings to be? Now we're talking TVs because I know you guys do sound bars, headphones, so you guys are definitely spread thin. But as to TV reviews, how serious are you, or what kind of investment do you feel you need to do to make it as big as you want to be? Are you there already? How ambitious are you guys?
And in that question too, do you really think that it makes a huge difference? I know you were talking earlier, Ryan, about like the sizes should be similar. I mean, we can't review TVs for the entire year, otherwise you run out of manpower. But in that answer, like how, ambitious do you want to get, or are you there? Do you think there's a big difference if you do a 65, a 55, and an 85? Do you really think there's need for that for different TVs?
It's both are good questions. We're not there. I'm not happy about and I'm not happy because from a consumer point of view right now, I believe there's too much people that buy TVs that are not happy with when they get into their home. And that's the issue I want to solve, is that you should be happy when you buy TV. It shouldn't be that complex. And the difference between sizes and countries, it's in some cases the differences is relatively small, that maybe it doesn't matter that much, because like even like a while ago, like we bought different panels of the same model, and it was even different manufacturers, so not just a different factory, but different manufacturer, different technology, LVA if I'm not mistaken, but different ones, and response time were different, contrast was different, viewing angle was a bit different too. In some cases, it could be enough that it could be a deal breaker or misrepresent the review. It's hard to know in advance, though. It's hard to know, and especially that in some cases, manufacturers, we even saw that over time, at the beginning of the year, it would be better, and then later in the year, it would be worse. So that's also an issue. So there's a lot of stuff there. Are we gonna fix it at some point? I hope so, but it's a hard problem. So it's hard, and I think there's no way around having like all the job that like you do, all different YouTube channels. There's value in that. All the different comments online, on Reddit. There's no way around that. There's no way a company could be able to have the whole story. It needs to be brought up by people. It needs to be brought up by different point of view, different people, different usage, different TV sizes, and all that stuff. I hope we do a better job, but it's a hard one.
Well, I agree. I think it's really difficult for people to expect you guys to have 3 or 4 different sizes of the same model, or even 2. TVs are so expensive. Currently, you guys buy them all yourself. Would you ever consider like communicating with some of the brands to get a larger size? Would that be an option? Or I don't know how active you are. Do you have I know you don't get TVs from them directly, but would that be a helpful thing, or is that a possibility to get like the larger sizes later in the year? Or do you again think that there's just not enough that would change in most models?
It's a good question. Up to now, I've been pretty strict on never getting a review sample. Like pretty strict on it. We buy our stuff ourselves. There is value in review samples, especially to get them early is one, but also just for like covering some different stuff. In general, though, it's also like something that's internally we discuss a lot since a few years of how do we deal with that problem? How do we expose it better in even other tools? It would be really cool that like an incorporation tool that you could select a size and it would actually show the differences IPS versus VA directly in the tool itself, right? Not just hiding into text somewhere. So there's and that's something that's been on the drawing board for us for years now that we never got to. In the end, I think specific for that, I think we're gonna get there. I don't think it's gonna be via the samples by manufacturers. I think it's going to be a mix of educated guess plus some measurements either from like community, other YouTubers, or also some just going to the stores, or even buying in some cases some other extra models when we think it's legit enough the difference that we need to explore more. Maybe not do a full complete review, but maybe just a review of the things that we expect is going to change. So I think there's ways we're going to get there in a maybe good enough way, but not perfect way, especially around countries. That's a hard one there.
And what I'd like to do is jump through some of the super chats before we let you guys go, because a lot of people have some pressing questions. And we'll start with this one, I think I was going to ask Ryan anyway. We know that the 1204 firmware update, in my opinion, brought it below the QN90A. However, if they update it to the way it should perform, would you score it again if it ends up being better? Because KG and a lot of us, when we looked at it before the firmware, looked great, and now it isn't. Is this something that you revisit if the firmware update is significant and change your recommendation?
Sure. Thanks, KG, for the question. Yeah, if Samsung does update the TV, of course, we will update the review and test it again and see what got changed and what got fixed. Initially, though, there is a point here that what we touched on a little bit earlier was the peak brightness not being a reliable test anymore. There is a little bit of the usage score problem and the way that the scores are weighted that comes into play here a little bit with the QN90A versus the QN90B, because in terms of brightness, certain window sizes are brighter, the colors are brighter. There's a bunch of different things that are in its favor, of course, for the QN90B, but then it falls short in some others. So the verdict that we got to in the end was that it wasn't necessarily better, but I think that we got to the right verdict in the wrong way, sort of thing, just because of the way that the usage scores are calculated. And it's possible that the QN90B does beat out the QN90A with the firmware updates that should come. Come on, let's go, Samsung. So yeah, it's things that we did notice, though, in terms of like QN90A versus QN90B was the local dimming was something that was obvious to us. I think you touched on it a little bit in your video as well, that our version of the 1204 didn't fix the blooming. It seemed to be like when we watched them side by side and watch a bunch of different content, they traded blows in a lot of places. The algorithm was a bit different. It wasn't the same, but like some scenes, the QN90A would look better. Some scenes, the QN90B would look better. To us, in the majority of scenes, or let's say more than the average of the scenes, the QN90A took the cake a little bit, but it was so minor that they couldn't really be scored that different, but they may have gotten to the same score for different reasons. So to us, it seemed like a parallel move for local dimming, if not a little bit worse, but marginally. But I hope that gets fixed in a future firmware update, not 12.11, of course. We learned from FOMO, but we do hope that that gets fixed, and then we can update the review. Also, with the changes that Cedric was mentioning, we hope to fix the reviews across all TVs to be more in line with what people expect.
And speaking of just firmware and OS in general, BatTex wants to know, TV bugs and the OS as it bugs weight to the OS themselves. Should that be a focus in the review? Is it weighted too much? Is it a fair criticism? Well, not everyone may encounter those issues. What are your thoughts on weighting as it pertains to the bugs that are software bugs more than image quality?
It's a bit hard to know when you're reviewing the unit if it's going to be a bug or not, if the manufacturer is going to fix it at all. So it's a little hard to say if it's a bug or a feature. Of course, that's when we rely on the community to give us feedback if something does change, if they do see improvements, and then we can go back and retest things. In terms of like actual firmware bugs or software bugs like on the Tizen interface on a Samsung or on an LG WebOS, if we do notice sluggishness, it's not factored into score anywhere, but it's something that we mention in the written review. But in terms of like desaturation of colors in at the brightest colors or something like that it's not supposed to do, it's a little hard to know unless we get feedback from people or firmware updates to know if that's a bug or a feature.
That makes sense. And TechMed wanted to clarify in his original question about whether you guys are big enough to do what you guys want to do. He didn't mean to be rude if it sounded like that. He just wanted to know, or he just wanted to express that maybe you guys aren't large enough to hit these ambitions. So thank you. He's a regular, so he was very excited to come on and say hello to you guys. And of course,
and by the way, just on that note, I don't want people to hold themselves back. I need to write it really nicely or stuff. I prefer to get feedback, even if it's more sometimes direct. Feedback in a way to see it, even written in a way, is worthwhile. So don't hesitate to send feedback. Don't try to be politically correct necessarily, all that stuff. That's how we improve. We improve via feedback. And yeah, sometimes it's not so fun if the intent if we try. But don't worry about that. If you think there's an issue, send it, and then we're gonna worry about how to fix it ourselves.
Yeah. I had when he messaged, I knew that he didn't mean it in a negative way. So that's why I was asking him questions, because he had just kind of, I think he was mentioning the scale, and that's why I asked him. He's always got good questions, but here's another one here. Go ahead.
Oh,
or
yeah.
did you want to put this up? I don't know.
This was underscoring his point, because he bought the QN90B 85-inch. It's amazing, but then the 65-inch was lukewarm review, because this is his kind of like saying, hey, 85-inch, totally different TV. But it's hard for you guys, because then you'll have like, okay, we have the 85-inch review here, then with the 65. So I see where you guys are going with that. Now, but in the future, though, kind of just bigger picture, as TV companies almost treat their larger sizes completely differently, in the sense that it may be a completely different panel source manufacturer, panel technology, yet they give it the same model number, but the pricing isn't even close. Like, wow, that 85-inch is a lot more expensive. Will you recognize that in the review of the smaller TV by indicating that? Or I guess you'll have to, I mean, how do you plan for those kind of changes that appears to be the trend for some of these TV makers right now? Like the Sony X95k is another example, where the 85-inch appears to be very different than the 65. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and this right now, our strategy is really to rely on community feedback as much as possible. We do, in general, even internally with the ones we buy, it used to be that we buy like just 55-inch. That would be like the main sizes we bought. Now we're starting to buy more, but we still like buy bigger. It's like 65, but it's rare that we go a little bit above that. But I think that's also another gap from everyone, because increasing size is one of the main factors to change TV, right? And a lot of people are getting now 85 and they want to be in that range. And that's the thing, even from a logistic point of view of manipulating the TV here, it's going to be harder and harder to deal with. And that I hope the community can provide as much feedback as possible. And on our end, we're going to try to make it as apparent as possible, and even in recommendations, to be conscious of that and not recommend a certain size if a community says that it's much different or something. So we're going to try to do a better job at that.
I think just having kind of a standard 65-inch is kind of the size to go to is very good, because like you said before, it's really hard to know what's going to be the differences until maybe halfway through the year. Like you go on AVS forums and you got a million people on there that are like going back and forth. And so that's another resource. And so like you said, in your community on ratings.com, go in there and say, hey, the 75 is a VA versus the smaller 60. Most people are going to get a 65-inch or smaller. A vast majority of people, like when I install TVs, rarely do I get these larger sizes. So it's a very small percentage. So I get the point of some of the questions they're asking, but I think even if you have a good benchmark for a certain size, 65, 55, whatever, we're getting a good general idea of how good that TV is, and I think the system is working great. So happy to help improve. I know that Classy said that, we had talked to Shay about having Keep It Classy Tech on, because he's had some questions for you guys in the past. And he said here that he does have some designs for new brightness patterns that he'd like to share with you. So you guys should email link up, or you can message him on Twitter at any time, he had said, just so you guys have that. He's a calibrator, of course, and has some pretty good feedback, and is very active on the AVS forums and whatnot.
Yep.
Did you have any other questions, FOMO?
Well, I think we're kind of like just over an hour.
Oh yeah, we're pushing them into overtime here. These guys are on the East Coast. They want to go home for the weekend.
Holidays coming up for us. I don't know if you guys should, but you definitely want to continue this conversation, right? And sometimes we have a couple of very interested calibrators who would love to talk to you on the more technical side, maybe with Ryan and your team, just to see, hey, how realistic is this? Because they're volunteering their time to help you guys out as well. They're saying, look, we just want to make it better for everyone. So to the degree we can have those discussions, we'd love to have you back on and just bring on different input from different people, so that not just your members, but people realize we're all on the same team here, right? We want to help people make the right decision, but there's so much information. You got 85-inch, you got different firmware. There is no way any single individual or website can encompass it all, and different opinions. Someone wants the boost, some the accuracy. So I think as far as we're on the same page in terms of the direction, it's such a growing community that the people, the fans, be the installer who only he does installation questions. I have no idea. Oh, when is that TV great? Oh, well, when you install, this happens, right? And there's just so many facets to TV ownership that having you guys just reach out to us. Hey, bring us on. Let's talk about this thing you put up. What? They actually watched my live stream.
I bet you there's nobody that looks at your guys' remote scores more than me, because I'm all about TV remotes, man. I have to mess with TV remotes all the time. So when someone tells me that the Samsung remote is clearly the most effective, it's up, down, left, right, so easy to use. But then we have the backlit remote of the Sony, and I'm I love it, but the battery runs out in 2 days. So there's all kinds of things like that. What were you going to say, Ryan?
Well, I was happy that they implemented that backlight. The remote for a while there on Sony wasn't great. I did not like it.
I want the new one, the smaller Sony one. I want to see that. I haven't seen the new Sony one with the. Have you guys got a TV that's had that new backlight yet?
We just got our hands on the X90k, I believe.
Does
but
it
I haven't
have
played
it?
with it yet. I think it has the smaller remote, but I haven't played with it yet.
Oh, I'm excited. That's gonna see.
Just got it.
We all have different approaches, and we all have different value to bring. And like I said, I always just come from the common guy that installs TVs, and the feel of the TV and some of that stuff is what I get. But no, I love your guys' systems. I'm happy you guys came on today, and we didn't go too far into the actual changes in some of the scoring, but as Cedric had said, that's a complicated situation, and even sounds like your internal debate about the scoring systems is kind of hard to pin down, huh? So we're going to really have to put our heads together for anything like that.
Oh yeah, and then for all of this, so we're happy to be on, and also it's something that, as I mentioned, the last few years, I feel like we kind of dropped the ball, so we're sorry for that, and we're working on. We changed a few things internally to be able to act more on it, and we want to continue that discussion because all your input is variable. It's variable to improve, and at the end, we all, as mentioned, we all have the same goal, and we need everyone too, because even us internally, we watch all your videos and we learn from some stuff too from it, right? There's some stuff that we didn't test, that we didn't discover, or different viewpoints also, and that's useful too. And I think we need to work all together. So thanks for that, and
thanks, guys.
I hope that we're going to be able to continue the discussion and see some changes. So that would be cool.
Well, definitely. Yeah. You have anything else, Brandon? I'm gonna.
Oh no, I mean I don't have anything. I mean I can either stick around and answer some questions, FOMO, if you want to, or we can just let that.
Oh yeah, if you have a few minutes, there are a couple questions I can run through real quick from the group. So guys, how about the next 5 minutes? Any questions we haven't gotten to? Just let it run out, and because there's a couple that was going to hit from our fans because they don't always get a chance to hear what directly from Ryan and Cedric. Oftentimes it's not answered at all. Okay, so one question was, and I'm not going to say the specific TV model because things go by, but when you say one TV is graded higher than the other, let's say for gaming, right? What are you guys looking at in gaming? Because a lot of people kind of take issue. Wait a minute, this is a better gaming TV. I have it, but rather than talk about their specific objection, what are you looking at when you're scoring gaming, assessing its gaming performance?
Sure. If you take a look at the website, you actually can see the breakdown for yourself under the video games or any of the usage scores, which are the final numbers at the top of the review. Let's say you can see how every single thing gets broken down. So
I'll share one. Yeah, I'm
if
share,
you don't mind.
I already
good idea.
I looked at these earlier, and this is gonna lead us down into a big this could last for the next hour, so we better not go too far into it. But you know, can you guys see this? Here is what he's talking about for video games.
That's it. So video games like HDR movies, HDR gaming, they all have a different breakdown. Now these are curated from the community. We get feedback from the community about what people care about most. So then you'll actually have the full breakdown and what matters more than other things and how we actually finally get to our final score breakdown. And this constantly changes. This is something that we revamp and try to keep up with everybody as the market changes and as people's expectations change. Something that we haven't been so quick to adapt to. We want to be a little bit faster, and what we will be doing quicker. But like you can see, input lag is something that people really feel is important for gaming. So we've put it at 17%. Response time is up there, contrast, and a bunch of other factors that all factor into the video game score.
One of the things
is like a mixture of everything. But the important thing I just wanted to mention there is you can create your own. Cedric mentioned it before, but you can actually see it right there. Create your own usage score, and then you can actually break it down as you want. What's important to you? You can put the weighting of.
Oh, this is cool.
Everything.
Honestly, I've never even seen this before. So that tells you how.
Yeah.
Broken there, right? Maybe we have a bug. Okay.
And I thought I was a big fan, but look, you can go down here and customize this by adding in what you're going to use. So when I tell people, if you're over 50%, get a LG of gaming. If you use gaming more than 50%, then there you go. But yeah, I like this. This is so cool. You can do all kinds of stuff in here. So then you can save it as what you want it to call my rating. And then this would reflect on all TVs then, or would it be just for this specific TV? If I save this,
it's going to create a table with the score.
Okay.
And you can speak like a specific point. Like if you want like care more about input lag, for example, you can change specific input lag, how much more weight. Depth tool, though, specifically, it's a little bit outdated as far as like our code side of the backend of the website. So it feels a bit clunky in the edges. So it's not going to appear into reviews yet, but that's something that we want to work on in the future. For now, it's going to create a table, and you can sort by that usage, by your own usage, that table.
It's pretty awesome. And I just wanted to show people this too, because this is important. See, when they have HDR movies, look, Dolby Vision is only 0.4%. So don't worry if your TV doesn't have Dolby Vision.
That's right. That's right.
Everybody whining about Samsung not having Dolby Vision. And then I see Samsung as one of the brightest, best looking TVs. 0.4%. There you go.
The remote should be scored higher than Dolby.
Yeah, the remote, exactly. The remote's better than Dolby Vision until they can do tone mapping and all the technical stuff. But anyways, it looks really cool. Well, yeah, I mean, FOMO, I think you guys have to get going. How you guys, should we call it a day?
If you have like one more question, then we can do it.
Yeah, one more. I'm okay with that.
Let's see, FOMO, what's the best question you got on the board, FOMO?
All right, let me pull this up.
I'll stop sharing for a minute.
I apologize that I keep on popping out. I have this new trackball that I should have read your review before I got it. I'm scrolling, and then it hits the back button, and I leave the live stream like, what again? So I'm like,
I have the worst. Oh, did my camera turned out? That's funny. You can't even see me anymore. Well, I love my Sony FX3 camera, so I'm not getting rid of that, but I will change the battery out.
Exactly. So let me pull in this next question I saved up here for a second. And let's see.
Any big plans for the weekends, gentlemen? You guys?
No, my big plans were last weekend. Like Cedric said, it was Victoria Day here in Montreal for us. So last weekend was the long weekend.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but nothing special.
Cedric, are you taking your private jet anywhere this weekend?
If you know him, he's not like that.
I'm joking, dude. Come on, I just have fun.
I know.
So I found the question, but for some reason my comments don't go high enough. So this question is from That Tech. Love ratings. Please consider updating your contrast and local dimming testing and scoring, and the photos used for upscaling. So on the photos, they felt like the photos don't reflect how upscaling works. So that's something we're wondering if you're working on, maybe changing the upscaling. And so on that theme, so we feel there's a difference between upscaling low resolution and then upscaling low bitrate content. On the S95B, if you guys try this out, 4K but a low bitrate, a completely different TV than 4K at a higher bit rate. Whereas a Sony taking that same low bit rate, let's say a Netflix, right? Netflix will still give you 4K, even if it drops a little bit, but it's not as good on the S95B as on maybe the Sony. So low bit rate content maybe is a test that you guys could try, because a lot of people nowadays are streaming, and the streaming quality changes, and TVs that invest in doing a better job of upscaling lower bit rate is going to have that better experience for those people who don't have the gigabit connection that we all do, right? So that's one question. Are you guys looking into low bit rate scaling, I guess. And then the other one is, are you working on updating your local dimming testing in order to address some of the maybe gamification that a lot of these TV brands kind of, the synthetic tests, they already know what you guys are going to do, and they're going to nail it every time. And so what are your thoughts on those two testing updates?
And I can I add it, because I don't want to overcomplicate it, but like if in the same local dimming thing, is there a way to just do a local dimming with just a wide screen with white toward the edges, where, you know, the local dimming it may not be your same circle pattern, but, you know, you can clearly see you know, blooming in the widescreen bars? Is that something that could be addressed too? Just add it in. Let's go ahead.
It's both good questions. For T contrast and local dimming, even right now in the review, it feels slightly, kind of slightly sometimes missing a little bit the context because of the blurriness between how useful native contrast is versus the local dimming. There's that problem there that we're not 100% happy with how it's currently solved. It's not, I don't think it's that bad specifically on one, but it's something that feels slightly off there. For the local dimming specifically, for actual like gaming of it, now in the past we were really only, well, not 100% really, but mostly looking at that like circle or the stuff moving. Now like we added a few more videos, but also internally, like and when we do the test, we look at also more stuff to make sure it corresponds. So gaming, the local dimming shouldn't happen too much nowadays compared to before. So I'm not concerned about that. But my concern around that area, though, is I don't think we do a really good job exposing the wall contrast as a wall part. And that, I think there is a slight gap. But this is kind of hard to fix. So we're not planning on fixing it in the short term, that part. Even though it's not perfect, but for now, I think we can minimize the damages based on what we have. So, but yeah, so that part we're not gonna tackle on it soon. The upscaling part, that's something that even we look even at the beginning of the year, we look more into it. What's making it tricky also is, well, upscaling is a sometimes fast used word of what it actually means. I mentioned bitrate is one, but and even like what the signal that we receive, sometimes it is a 4K signal, but the device that's playing is playing lower resolution content, right? If you play Netflix on your Apple TV, but Apple TV sends a higher one, but the Netflix might be lower, but the TV doesn't know officially that, and that creates also other kind of personal problem, right? So this. Specifically the upscaling part and the changing like the photos, it's not planned to short term to do that. It's not perfect, and we pretty much give the same score to every TV right now, so it's not perfect. But there's other stuff though that we want and to tackle in that space, mostly about the gradient processing part. Right now, we test for gradient, we test like the native gradient one, but I think that there's a lot more we can do. To even showcase how good, and especially if you turn on like smooth gradation at different levels of it, how it does. And that plays a part of the upscaling, especially lower bit rate. It's going to have more of these issues, and it's going to help for that. So that we do plan on tackling it in the short to medium term, that part. But the upscaling, it's kind of hard. We tried, but it's hard to find patterns that are not just too much pattern, but also real life that really showcase enough without too much stuff. It's hard. And if you have a good scene or good photo to send it to think really showcase, send it to us. We're looking for content. And if we find one, then we're going to update it. But finding the content for that is hard, right?
That's a good point. You got to have the content. Like, how do you generate a synthetic low bit rate?
Oh, man, it's crazy.
Break the internet today and see what happens.
I use YouTube TV on these TVs, and I like to use it because it doesn't have that good of bit rate or resolution. But man, like the S95B, I think Classy had mentioned it early on that it has some issues with the lower bit rate content, and then it has real motion issues with it too. You can't utilize the motion interpolation or lack thereof to make it like stabilize in low bit rate content. It's kind of like almost feels like it's a bit broken in that respects. I get like a lot of stutter and judder, just no matter where the settings are. I can mess them around all over the place. But when you're doing like, you know, who knows?
Yep.
Did I cut out?
Oh, you're back. You're back.
Did I cut out?
Nope. We can hear you.
Anyways, that's just, you know, I had some issues with that again. And he's saying who watches 480? Well, a lot of people watch 480 because they don't know, because when you're watching a lot of this stuff, it changes resolutions all the time on you. You have no idea what some of this streaming content comes in at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you know, just to
what you say, Ryan?
Well, I was going to say the interesting point that Cedric touched on was that if the signal is being sent through as 4K, but it's sending through a 480p video, the TV doesn't think it has to upscale. Potentially, it'll do some bitrate processing and things like that, but it potentially won't be actually doing what it's meant to be doing. It won't utilize the power of the chip that might be in it to process that signal if it's, you know, incorrectly set. So
that happens with the Apple TV and like YouTube TV. It thinks it's coming in at 4K, but it looks terrible, and so the TV doesn't really do anything. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, I think this is a great time to end. We're at 90 minutes. I want to respect your time, guys, and so you guys can come back later and talk later.
Absolutely.
Brandon, you have anything left to say? Otherwise, we'll close it out. Oh,
is he frozen?
Brandon's frozen. So let's do that. I'll close this out then. Thank you so much, Ryan and Cedric, for coming by. Oh, Brandon came back on just in time. Brandon?
Yeah, man, my bad. I don't know.
Oh, look, there's two of you. I love it.
He probably got bored and went back on Call of Duty. I'm gonna have to go tell him what.
Okay, we're gonna close it out then. Thank you so much. Ratings. Ratings. I got it right.
You said it right.
Thank you so much, Ratings, for coming by. Ryan and Cedric, we love to have you back. We can jump in and talk about more testing and stuff. And we're also looking forward to the threads about, you know, helping you guys improve. I know the team here, they have a set of stuff they'd love to contribute for you guys as well. But again, we appreciate so much for your time coming by, talking to the community. And well, if you guys haven't joined and become members of Ratings, we invite you to. We both are. I use it at length, as well as Brian Whisper Status 74. So with that, I'd like to thank you all. And until next time,